Caitlin stood out in a graduating class that had some really outstanding students. She was the winner of our Gilbert Robinson Award, which is the highest research award to undergraduates. I had her in a senior class on electrical properties and materials, and I could see very early on that she was confident and she was really poised for future success.
She was a student in one of my classes in the course that I was teaching. It was a lab course, and the quality of the work that she did in my lab for her research project, and it is truly memorable because, as I mentioned, we are still using it in our department, right? It has become every undergraduate who has graduated from the department since then has done the lab that is there because of Caitlin's work. I mean, so you can sort of go back 10 years, all the undergraduates who graduated from the department have done something that is there because of Caitlin. So that's what is memorable about her work here.
Caitlin was a PhD student in Stanford's bioengineering graduate program, and she worked jointly between my lab and the lab of Professor Jennifer Cochran. She had an idea for making a new type of cancer therapy, and it was built from a combination of chemistry and biology and protein engineering. And she mastered all of those techniques in her PhD with her two professors, including myself, and published some beautiful papers that we, put out into the public domain in the scientific literature. But then she decided to launch the company, and she went out and met with over 50 investor candidates until she finally closed a deal with a group of investors, and now she is the CEO of Two Step Therapeutics. And it was such an extraordinary sequence of accomplishments that I felt she would be really well suited to be recognized with this award.
The thing that stands out for Caitlin, in my mind at least, is that she has made the most of all the opportunities. That is what stands out for her, and I hope that's the message and lesson that our students can learn, is that Clemson gives you lots of very good opportunities, and it's up to you to make the most of them.